As you know, when planning for retirement, we have two primary individual account types, Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs. Trying to determine when to utilize which account can sometimes be confusing, and there's more to consider than just the tax implications. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the best 18,000 financial minds on YouTube. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steven Spicer, and it's my goal to help you not get killed in taxes and to overcome the significant risks to which mainstream advice leaves you exposed. In this video specifically, we're tackling a basic concept to start a foundation for deeper retirement planning discussions in the future. To Roth or not to Roth? That is the question. Let's jump right in and look at the technical differences between the two side by side. On the contributions end, whatever you put into your traditional IRA is potentially deductible if you are not an active participant in an employer retirement plan above a certain income threshold. Deductibility means it will look like you did not earn that income in the year you are contributing. Your Roth IRA contributions, however, are never deductible. But what you're able to sock away in those accounts never has to suffer the threat of taxation again. You see, both accounts grow tax deferred, meaning you can buy and sell assets within these accounts and you won't have to worry about any sort of taxable capital gains. But then on the back end, you'll be able to withdraw from your Roth accounts without any tax implications, as long as you meet the qualified withdrawal requirements. Whereas 100% of what is in your traditional accounts has yet to be taxed. It will be taxed as you make withdrawals at ordinary income tax rates. Basically, the Roth versus traditional decision gives you the choice of when you want to take your tax hit. You do have to reckon with that tax liability that the government is imposing at some point. You just get to decide when. Get it out of the way with the Roth or delay with the traditional. Real quick, before we move on with this tax comparison conversation, there are a couple of other differences between these two accounts. There are income limits for Roth IRA contributions. If you're making too much money, you can no longer make basic contributions, although there is a backdoor contribution option that is entirely acceptable that we'll dive into in another video. Traditional accounts only have income limits regarding the deductibility of contributions when you are an active participant in an employer retirement plan. Regardless, as long as you have earned income, you can always make non-deductible contributions to your traditional IRA. That's part of what makes a backdoor strategy possible and makes it even work. Again, we'll explore that in detail later. Next, you should consider future required minimum distributions, RMDs. In short, traditional accounts have them, Roth accounts do not. The reason for the RMDs with traditional accounts is that the government wants its cut. So they force you in your 70s to start taking withdrawals from your accounts, whether you want to or not, which can have some nasty tax surprises for someone who has not done enough long-term tax planning in their earlier retirement. Once again, that's a topic we'll explore in future videos. Both accounts require RMDs after death on the inherited version of the accounts. But remember, the Roth has already been taxed and is not subject to any more taxation, whereas the traditional has not. And once again, could create some tax consequences for which we should probably prepare ahead of time so that they don't really hurt once your beneficiaries receive them. Both accounts have early, before age 59 and a half, withdrawal penalties, although the Roth account does allow you to access your contributions without penalty at any time. So if you make a $5,000 contribution into your Roth IRA for 6 years in a row, and then decide you need $30,000 to help with a new home down payment, say your account has grown to $50,000, you can pull out that $30,000 contribution amount, no problem, no penalty, leaving the $20,000 worth of growth to continue growing in there tax-free. The big negative you need to weigh there, though, is that now you don't have that extra $30,000 in your Roth generating tax-free growth for you anymore. That's going to make a big difference in the long run. It still may be worth it, but yeah, you should be aware you can't just put it all back in there when you're ready, because both account types are subject to annual contribution limits. In 2024, that's $7,000 per year plus an additional $1,000 catch-up if you're 50 or older. Anyway, let's get back to the timing of your taxation. to help you make that decision of whether or not you want to take taxes now or later, to Roth or not to Roth. Now, you should know that if taxes never changed, if there were just one fixed tax rate, no matter your income level, for example, then it wouldn't matter. The end result would be the same, whether you took the tax hit on the front end or waited until your account looked way bigger than it actually was, because you still owe the government its slice, and then took your hit. Mathematically, it does not matter whether you multiply by that percentage, that tax, at the beginning of the equation or at the end. It's all the same. That's how multiplication works. Say, for example, you get a $7,000 bonus at the end of this year, and you're trying to decide whether to dump that into a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. Well, if you put it into your traditional, you can get all $7,000 in there. If you choose the Roth, though, you're still going to pay taxes this year on that bonus. Let's say we have a fixed 25% tax rate in our hypothetical world here. That's $1,750 you'll need to set aside to pay your taxes on that $7,000 bonus. That leaves you with only $5,250 that you can put into your Roth IRA. Now, side note, this will come up again later when we touch on other reasons to choose one of these accounts over the other. With the Roth here, you're effectively able to get more socked away, right? Think about this example. We still have another $1,750 that we could contribute to our Roth if we wanted. Does that make sense? In short, a taxed $7,000 is worth much more to you later than an untaxed $7,000, okay? But we're just talking about this $7,000 bonus here. So we're just gonna consider the comparison with the after-tax amount going into the Roth for that $7,000 bonus. So they can both be invested in the exact same way. So let's see what happens if they both grow by, let's say, 200% over the entire time that they're in there, however long that may be. The $7,000 traditional is now worth $21,000, and the $5,250 Roth is now worth $15,750. Well, that traditional IRA is certainly giving the appearance, the feeling of more wealth than the Roth would. But remember, it still needs to be taxed. So we're in retirement now. We need money from these accounts. From the Roth, we would be able to pull exactly what is there because it is not subject to any taxation at this point, giving us exactly $15,750. For the traditional, on the other hand, we'll need to give Uncle Sam his cut. He's been waiting patiently. Again, we're assuming this static tax rate of 25%. So 25% of our $21,000 account is $5,250. That leaves us, after tax, with, $15,750. The exact same amount. The only variable that really matters here, from a math perspective at least, is taxes. The length of time doesn't matter. The rate of return doesn't matter. Just your tax rate today compared to your tax rate in the future. For example, during your peak earning years, your tax rate is likely going to be higher than it ever will be. That tax rate at the period of contribution is what effectively determines the relative value of a traditional IRA contribution, whereas the tax rate at the period of withdrawal is what determines the value of a Roth IRA contribution. Of course, we can't be sure exactly what the future tax rate is going to be, but anyway, so to answer the question mathematically, it's kind of like a seesaw. As I mentioned a second ago, if you're in your peak earning years in a higher tax bracket than you've ever been and likely ever will be, old school traditional accounts make sense. That was actually the original idea behind traditional accounts. The thought was that workers could forego paying a, say, 35% tax, and then in retirement only have to pay a 12% tax. But the reality for some, though, is that you're really good at accumulating wealth, especially when you're working with a good financial advisor who is helping you accumulate and grow your wealth. But so yeah, for some clients, the seesaw tilts the other way. Because of the impact of their compounding wealth, they have reason to believe that they're going to be subjected to high tax rates in retirement. In that case, or also, of course, if you're just earlier in your working years, it's mathematically better to take advantage of Roth-style accounts. Now, from a purely mathematical tax planning perspective, as you get more and more into your Roth-style accounts, the seesaw starts to tip back the other way, right? Think about the extreme here. If you were able to get everything into your Roth accounts, for example, barring any major other sources of income, which is possible, but barring that in retirement, your tax rate could be 0% in retirement, which means take the tax benefit today because there isn't really one later at this point. You see, although a 0% tax in retirement sounds nice, from a mathematical perspective, it also kind of implies that we missed some planning opportunities earlier, right? Because taking the tax hit today at a 32% rate, when the other side of that decision is incurring a 0, 10, or even 12% tax in retirement, a much smaller tax later, that doesn't really math out in our favor. But then, of course, if we defer too much, we can tip that seesaw back again to where the Roth account once again makes the most sense. Let's look at some specific numbers real quick to drive this home. Let's go back to our 25% fixed tax example from earlier. Both traditional and Roth options left us with $15,750, right? After Uncle Sam got his cut, whether it was in the beginning or in the end. Well, what if the tax rate today was 25%, but the future rate was 15%? Well, in that case, the traditional IRA would mathematically put us ahead. The amount we'd be able to withdraw would be $17,850. That's $2,100 or 13% more than the Roth would have given us here. On the other hand, if our future tax rate ends up being 35%, the Roth would have made more sense. Our traditional withdrawal would get cut down to $13,650. $2,100 or 13% less this time. So hopefully you can see how this can be a bit of a balancing act as you start to get into your higher earning years and you're trying to plan and make the smartest decisions for your future. Here are a few other considerations you should keep in mind as you're making this decision. It's not only about what your ordinary income from a tax perspective, so that includes withdrawals from your tax-deferred, tax-deductible accounts like your IRAs. It's not only what your ordinary income is going to look like this year compared to during retirement. There are other factors that can make a big difference. Say, for example, you plan to move from a high tax state to a low tax state. That can make an even stronger case for delaying those taxes via traditional contributions. But on the Roth side, you don't have to worry about RMDs, which means if you live a long life, through your 70s, well into your 80s or beyond, you get to extend the tax-free growth that is happening inside your account. With traditionals, you're going to be forced to take out and thus be taxed on more and more once you hit your RMD age in your 70s. Another point in Roth's favor, you can effectively get more retirement funds into a Roth IRA compared to its traditional counterpart. That's the point we discussed earlier about how a taxed $7,000 is worth more than a not yet taxed $7,000. But for me, probably the biggest consideration beyond the question of taxes is the idea of removing as many variables from your retirement equation as possible. There are so many, so if we can remove one big one like this, that's worth something additional to me. It might be to you as well. You should think about it. Personally, I'm willing to pay a little bit more in taxes today in order to get that variable that is future taxation as low as possible. I love the idea of having as much money in retirement as possible in an account where I don't have to worry about this aspect of public policy risk, about how new tax laws might affect my money, my savings, my retirement lifestyle. That being said, when working with a client in the highest tax bracket living in a high tax state, we've got some things to consider. It's not just a math question, but that absolutely is part of an informed decision. We'll continue to explore different ideas in this vein here on this channel to help you make the most informed decisions possible with these important, often convoluted financial planning considerations. I look forward to seeing you around and helping however I can. I wish you all the best. Take care.